from our expert panelists and learn some tips about why you should choose the UK and London for your base in Europe. There's a really strong community here of fintech companies, and I'm pleased to say many of those have really thrived and even grown during the last 6 months during the global pandemic, with London's fintechs securing $3.6 billion in venture capital investment this year, with more than half coming from US investors. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our fantastic panel hosted by our very own Dhaval Gore, head of the Mayor's International Business Programme. I will let Dhaval do the proper introductions, but I'm thrilled to welcome everyone. We have Elena Novotkreshchanova, Vice President for International for Remitly, Keith Gross, Head of UK for Plaid, 2 companies from North America who've expanded to London. And we have Diana Paredes, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Suade Labs, and Simon Taylor, hopefully co-founder of 11FS, 2 businesses who are on our recent trade mission. Welcome to all of our guest panelists, and I will now hand over to Dhaval. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome, everyone. My name is Dhaval. I head up the Mayor's International Business Programme here at London & Partners. So on today's panel, we have a RegTech, we have an open banking platform, a banking and fintech consultancy, and a digital money transfer company. They all have one thing in common: they are highly ambitious in expanding internationally with a specific focus on the UK and US. Today we'll be discussing the why, the when, and the how when it comes to expanding overseas, specifically for fintechs and specifically into London and the States. Before I introduce our guests, a thanks to those who have shared your questions beforehand, which I'll try and weave into the discussion as we go along. But please do use the chat, as Karen said before, do use the chat function for further questions and comments. We've also got a short Q&A at the end, so that gives you an opportunity to ask more questions as well. So I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Diana Paredes, CEO and co-founder at Suade Labs, Simon Taylor, co-founder at 11FS, Keith Gross, head of UK at Plaid, Elena Novotkreshchanova, VP International Europe and APAC at Remitly. Nice to see you all, and thanks for joining us. So let's first hear about your companies and a couple of initial thoughts, perhaps, and comments on your experience of expanding into the UK or the US, depending on which side of the pond you're in. I'm going to group you into the UK and US teams. So let's first hear from the UK team, or Team UK. Diana at Suade, and then we'll hear from Simon. Both, by the way, shameless plug, are on the Mayor's International Business Programme. So Diana, maybe some initial words from yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you very much for having me on this conversation. It's really a pleasure to be able to share, I guess, about our adventures as a London started fintech that has kind of grown internationally thanks to our being based here, we think. So we're a RegTech, as we were mentioning before. We basically help to normalize and clean large amounts of data for the financial industry into regulatory outputs. So we have the most performant system in the market, and we can create regulatory outputs in the form of analytics and calculations and reports, at a pace that never has been seen before. We started in the UK a few years ago. It's been really exciting to start out of London. Now we've opened in Singapore, in France, opening in Madrid as well. And New York is basically the place we're looking at continuing to expand our footprint. I have to say that our experience as not just as an entrepreneur based in London, but also as an entrepreneur broadly in fintech, we have found that London is obviously one of the best places to start a company when it comes to the financial ecosystem, not least for the reasons that were mentioned before on how many financial institutions we have here, but also because of the cross-pollination in talent, the cross-pollination between the companies. We have such a great community in general that's very supportive, probably a lot less aggressive than Silicon Valley in so many ways. And I think that that's something that definitely has been a huge a huge privilege to be part of that community and to grow here and to continue expanding internationally, thanks to all the support we have from our community here.
Great, thank you, Diana. We'll probably come on and touch upon a few of those things, particularly around cross-pollination. Simon, a few words from yourself?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the Department for International Trade and everybody at Her Majesty's Government for inviting us. Really excited to speak to this audience today. I absolutely love fintech, and I'm delighted to be here. So 11FS is about 4.5 years old. We call ourselves a challenger consultancy. So if you've heard of challenger banks, we're that to consulting. So what would it look like if a startup quality team was hireable by incumbent banks to do exciting new and innovative projects? You may know us for our podcast, Fintech Insider, which is the #1 global fintech podcast. But we also have done partnership marketing with the likes of Plaid and many others. So we're happy to be involved. We primarily work with large financial institutions and help them do what we call truly digital. So we think often digital transformation hasn't worked, and what you need to do is potentially it's quicker, cheaper, easier to start again and build your new planet and new colony on Mars than it is to try and fix Earth. And indeed, we're quite fortunate that a lot of large banks believe in this, where we helped NatWest in the UK build a new digital challenger bank called Metal. We helped Standard Chartered build Mox, which is their digital challenger spin-out. And we're currently helping two banks, one in the US and of course one in the Middle East, build new digital challenger propositions. So we're super excited to be here. We work often with fintechs, especially when working in the US, for instance. We've partnered with Plaid on a couple of pieces, and we partner with others around the world. So we'd love to learn about your businesses, and we believe the future of financial services is more like a school of fish. We fintechs need to stick together.
Thank you, Simon. Now over to the US headquartered companies who've set up in London and growing their presence in the UK, but also using the UK to launch and fan out into Europe and wider. So perhaps we started with Eleanor.
Sure, absolutely. It's a real pleasure to be here, as all participants already mentioned, and great and brilliant initiative. So Remitly mission is to transform the lives of immigrants by providing the most trusted financial services. What does it mean? We operate in the area of remittances, if you ever heard about it, which is pretty much cross-border money transfers for immigrants that send money back home as a lifeline to support their families. We also have an online bank passbook that we launched in the US, and we're launching other products which are focused specifically on migrants and immigrants across the globe. I don't know if you are aware, but there are more immigrants globally than there are American population, which is 270 million. And it's a huge, huge industry of a size of 600 billion pounds. So it's often overlooked because the innovation tends to happen where there is a purse and people can spend. And we obviously, as a company, have a very big social angle on trying to empower those communities which are often excluded from the kind of financial innovation. So we're trying to bring this fintech innovation into people that really need it most. With regard to where we are with Remitly, it's headquartered in Seattle. And about 3 years ago, we decided to make a move to Europe. I joined the company 2 years ago, and it was just 4 people on the ground. Right now, we are more than 100 across Europe. We serve over 100 countries. We have 17 send origination countries and 88 receiving destination. We started in London, and then thanks to all the London network, we expanded in Europe, and we recently launched in Singapore, also out of London. So more than happy to share with you our experience. As of today, we process more than 200 million transactions. We're stage F. I would call it scale up more than startup by now. We probably start up in Europe, but we're a very large scale up for the US size. We're the largest independent money processor in the US. So yeah, that's briefly Remitly and where we are.
Thank you, Eleanor. And it's worth kind of stressing to the people on the call, Remitly is a B2C player. The rest of the folks on this call are primarily if not all, B2B players. So we will have an interesting discussion around motivations if you're selling directly to consumers as opposed to the business community. And last but by no means least, we've got Keith on the call. Keith from Plaid.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Dhaval. For those that aren't familiar with Plaid, Plaid is an open banking platform, which means we connect to thousands of banks across North America and Europe and offer a single API for financial data and real-time payments. We like to think of ourselves as the easiest way to connect your bank account to an application. We cover more than 11,000 banks now and power more than 3,000 fintech apps, including more than 80% of the largest fintechs in the US. So names like Coinbase, Robinhood, Venmo are all built on our tools. We like to think of ourselves as powering innovators. So we produce a suite of APIs and we just help other fintechs build great services on top of those. I joined in San Francisco where our headquarters are to help lead the expansion to Europe, moved over here in early last year and opened up offices in London. We've since scaled to 4 additional countries in Europe and opened an additional office in Amsterdam, and we're almost 50 people in Europe now. And it's been great working with London and partners to make that happen.
Thank you, Keith. Is it Plaid versus Plaid? Who knows? Tomato.
We'll respond to any of them, but I'm impressed that everyone's saying it correctly.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Keith. Hey, listen, we're going to probably try and break these conversations up into. We'll start off easily into the generics around international expansion, and I'll kind of open up the floor to anyone who wants to answer first and go first. So, what are the trigger points? I mean, you're all fintechs. I know what the trigger points are, I think, but it'll be interesting to know what made you ready? What was the kind of trigger for you to scale internationally? What were the sort of main criterias? Was it investors, consumers, talent, or combination of all, I guess? So who wants to go first?
I could jump in there if nobody else is ready. So I think for Plaid, given that we're a network, I think we've always had global ambitions. And so there were 2 things that came up that made it time to expand. One is that we felt as a company, we were ready to push out beyond North America. We're in the UK and Canada. We felt confident that we had covered those markets and we're ready to expand and offer more value on our platform. And then the second is customers pulling you. So as we scaled up and our customers got bigger, some of them were already in Europe or APAC and said, hey, can you come be here as well? So I think that combination of your ambition pushing you, but also your customers pulling you is really important because then okay, there's the seed of need that I can help solve as I expand into new markets. So that was what drove our decision on the Plaid side.
Right. I mean, and that consumer pull is a huge validation before you even arrive, right, Keith? So, folks, anyone else who wants to chime in?
Sure, I'm happy to add. I think for us, there were probably a few stories. First, we grew very extensively in the US, and again, strategically, there was the idea that if the business is to IPO, it needs to show a strong growth story. And for many businesses that want eventually to go public, being global and showing the ability to scale is quite important. So that was one reason. The other very important reason, which I think probably was the baseline, is that about 80 million of migrants do live in Europe. So our customer base was present in Europe, and London was a brilliant place to start off. So it was no brainer. We had to be here with all the variety of people that come in Europe to work and to provide for their families.
I'd like to add a little bit as well from like a pure enterprise perspective. So for example, for us, we're pretty much a bootstrap business. And I think that, customers have always come first. So effectively, wherever we look at international expansion, it is because we have found ourselves flying there or going to those locations quite a lot. And so it kind of drives the conversation. So we usually have signed our first customer there, and then that becomes a reason to kind of really look at a location more intensely. One other driver actually for us, so a lot of the offices that we're opening now are places where in any case we're planning to expand on, but in many ways we've also been using COVID almost as an accelerator for that, because there is a reality where You can very cheaply open offices internationally at this time, because you can basically look at hiring very valuable workforce remotely in a way that nobody has ever been used to before. And also from a customer perspective, we do enterprise, and so having someone in a particular location closer to them becomes a lot easier than them expecting you to travel, even as a founder, as a CEO, or as a senior person in the team, to meet them in person. You almost can say, well, this is my person from my team in X location, and I'm also on the conversation, but they can follow it on from a location effectively. So I think it's if you're interested in international expansion, COVID is almost a great way to start, because you can actually do it at a very low cost very quickly and test the waters very quickly as well in all sorts of locations, which is what we're finding as well. So it's aside from the offices we're opening already, we've basically started to open and started to recruit people pretty much around the world on the back of COVID.
Great. Thank you, Diana.
Build on that,
yep.
if I may.
Sorry, Simon. Yep.
For us, we obviously had a strategically important client in the US, so it became a no-brainer of a market for us. Similar with the Middle East and the Far East as well. We've had strategically important clients. We've been quite fortunate in that all of those clients have wanted us to service them remotely. However, to go deeper with them, it just really helps being at the other end of the phone, or just straight down being able to walk the halls. It makes such a difference. Now, we have actually benefited quite a bit from the pandemic, because it's moved the market towards us as a small business that happens to be in London and on a different time zone. Suddenly that matters a lot less. I'm having a lot more calls with San Francisco. I'm having a lot more calls with Hong Kong. And suddenly the world, it feels a little bit like in the last 6 months, the US has started to discover 11FS a little bit in a way that the UK and Europe had known about us for quite some time. And that's quite exciting. But at the same time, we know and still fully intend that in order to scale out that business, we have an office on the ground in New York. We're looking at a second one potentially. And then we're needing to look at where else across Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia do we need to be putting physical footprints. We can do that quite asset light because of the nature of our business, because we are naturally partnerships driven. But it's just going to be massively important that we're able to do this, because culture matters. I mean, you've just got to look at the Revoluts and the N26 trying to break the US market. You don't do it just because you did it well somewhere else. You need to work with people in the market that get the clients, that understand the culture, and that's going to be so critical for us to have any chance.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Simon. And it's that perennial, well, certainly in recent years, the perennial kind of question around remote first, servicing from afar, placing people on the ground. I guess when you move into account management type of operations, you've really got to be closer to your partners or your consumers. And of course, Diana, you've kind of preempted me. There was a question further down around what is COVID and what is the pandemic doing this year to companies like yourselves who are expanding internationally. We've always been on a high trajectory. Anyhow, is this kind of speeding things up? Maybe we'll start there. I mean, what does it look like from you, and how does London and the States? Because I want to try and keep it with those two markets. How is that fair in that context?
Sure, do you want me to start?
Yep, and I'll go in reverse. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that the US for us is obviously a huge opportunity. Just before COVID, I was basically flying to New York every other week, literally. And so I was kind of like, we have to open an office there anyways, just for the purposes of survival. And I think that the reality with the North American market is that it is in so many ways very similar to London. So I think that culturally, you're kind of ahead versus other European markets, right? Which is something that we have noticed. But also you get results very quickly. So if you start there and you have a compelling proposition, people are not very shy about talking about money and talking about contracts quite quickly. So at least for our space, we have found that expanding to North America was something that we wanted to do very well and carefully as well. And this is also why the Mayors International program on this that we've basically taken part in the past few weeks has been really exciting, because it also helps you to open very tangible doors to to help, really not only test the waters, but really get financial revenue on the back of conversations. And I think the sooner as a business you can get into real financial conversations, basically someone ready to pay for your value proposition, the faster you know that you've got a business. And I think North America is clearly very like-minded when it comes to fintech. It's also a market that I would say relative to London, actually, from a fintech perspective, doesn't have the same kind of quality. So I think that when you come from here to there, definitely in the enterprise space, maybe a bit less on the consumer piece, but definitely in the enterprise space, the proposition is very compelling because they just don't have as much when it comes to enterprise value propositions when it comes to the US. So as a I guess startup or scale up in the UK and in London, you're very attractive when it comes to North America because they just don't have the same kind of amount of quality startups, I would say, relative to what we have in London.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think I found, so the market's interesting to us because there are a lot more banks in the US. Therefore, there are a lot more people that are willing to pay us. So that's nice. But the other side of it is the cultures are so radically different. But the experience we've had in the UK, I think the UK had just a little bit of a jump start on neobanks being a topic of conversation in the mainstream, just a little bit sooner. Therefore, banks worried about that just a little bit sooner. Therefore, we've done the type of work that now banks in the US are trying to do before. And there aren't a lot of people that can point to, hey, we've done this before, unless they're pointing at another office with people that they've never seen. With us, it's the same people. We are the people that did that thing in Hong Kong. We're the people that did it in the UK. We're the people actively doing it in the US right now. So being small actually gives us a bit of a strategic advantage. And then the US is interesting again because there are lots of banks going through that. And then the pressures, not just with the pandemic, but on a mid-sized bank is a real sweet spot for us at the moment because net interest margin, near zero interest rates, the traditional business models under threat. And then the high cost of infrastructure, ATMs and branches are increasingly becoming obsolete. People want digital. They need a fast track to be able to get there. So if you're a mega bank and you've got billions of budget, that's great. But what if you're not that? Who do you call to get to that at like a way more startup style of budget? So I think we found a bit of a sweet spot with a market that is, has more than 4 banks in it, essentially. So it's super strategic for us and a very, very interesting space.
Yeah, just before I hand over to Keith, and I think it's really interesting. I'm still buzzing from a trade mission that we ran. Simon was involved as well through 11 Affairs, through North America, and some of the tier 2 banks we met. Right, the Fifth Third, for example, and Truist and Wintrust. It was interesting hearing what they've had to say in comparison to perhaps the JP Morgans of this world and Bank of America. Keith, perhaps you want to come in here.
I think getting back to the impact of COVID, in some ways it's a blessing to be a fintech or a startup or a scale up in that you're probably it's easy for you to adjust to the work from home life. And so I imagine for those of us on this call, it's been less of a disruption, but what we've seen is for a lot of banks and the types of enterprises, they just weren't set up for this. And so we are seeing a lot of companies having to really accelerate for lack of a better word, digital transformations. And so to echo Simon's point, that's what we've seen as a result of COVID is that some companies have had to really change how they operate, and the need for tools and infrastructure and assistance from fintechs to figure that out is definitely growing because of that. Yeah.
I'll hand over to Elena. I mean, just interesting, just following on from what Keith said, Elena. I mean, the stats are backing this up. Reports I'm reading with the shift from analog to digital, the banks are shifting that direction because the consumers, whether they've wanted to or not, are shifting into digital products, right? Because of lockdown and pandemic. I mean, the context of the pandemic, from your point of view, maybe in the international expansion arena as well.
Yeah, exactly right. I think the digital adoption, which was happening over the last 5 years, happened due to the pandemic in 5 days. So people kind of transitioned very quickly digitally. We were fortunate to see a spike in demand, so we were really busy during this time. Something I would say is an observation, generally looking at the fintech and probably recommendations to to those on a call, I do think that those businesses that thrive and survive in this situation are those that really solve the core customer needs. So we saw some really prospering, and those which are probably more kind of fancy add-on, I can use it for some time, but I don't really need it day to day, really struggling and suffering. So I think it's really a story of two cities. It's not a one story. Everyone is benefiting from the digital, and we see some companies really struggling, even though they're disruptors and fintech. So what we observed personally, yes, we did see a huge spike. We disrupt likes of Western Union and MoneyGram. So when physical brick and mortar got closed, everyone moved to digital. We also saw a really significant shift towards mobile wallets and mobile wallet solutions in destination countries, so likes of M-Pesa, etc. It's really booming now in emerging countries. Another thing that we did see from the B2C side is companies shifting more to self-service, obviously with call centers being—
I can't get on.
Oh, you can carry on, Elena. Yep.
Yeah, no worries. With call centers kind of being also exposed to the risk of COVID, companies really trying to shift towards being able to self-serve from the customer perspective and do really complex transactions, financial transactions themselves, and answer a lot of questions and making decisions online without calling and getting help. So that's what we observed. But yes, our volumes grew 200-300% during COVID times.
Great, thank you, Elena. If anyone's not talking, or please take yourself off, please put yourself on mute, please. Let's get back to international expansion, folks. Let's talk about some of the challenges. You know, you've kind of set up in various markets and offices around the world. You switched them on. Even before pandemic, you know, what are the key challenges? I mean, some of the folks on the call are either embarking or planning to set up in the US and or UK. Some of the key challenges that you've faced on your journey, if that would be great. Elena, why don't I start from you, and then I'll go back in the other direction.
Okay. Well, I'm a tech girl, so I will say anyone who plans to go internationally at the other side of the pond, you need to make sure your stack is built to localize and to make the business international. That means you can build a product that is needed in this specific region, which should be tailored to the customer need and product market fit. So your stack should be ready to be adjusted, adapted fast. That will be my first. That's from what you start, as long as you obviously have customer need, as we decided customer need comes first. Then I would also say it's about talent and resource. We were lucky to come to London, obviously, which has a brilliant talent pool, but for new businesses, it does take time to hire a team. And you do need a local team. I do truly believe that to be able to serve local customers, you need to have local knowledge. So essentially, you do need to hire talent that represents in some ways your product and your customer base. And you probably, if you are lucky, you should ring fence this resource and think, how can you scale fast? What I find with our org, we had to move much faster than our US counterpart, which is already a very established business of 400 people plus office. We were a team of 10, which were moving probably 10 times faster. So having ring fence, marketing, product resource, digital marketing, being able to have engineering locally, if you are lucky, is really, really important. That will be my recommendation in learning.
We'll probably touch upon talent in a few more minutes. It's the number one question, challenge, and often mistakes. So let's park that for a second. Keith, your key challenges. I mean, what have you faced?
Yeah, to be honest, I'd echo a lot of what Elena said. I think the thing that a learning for us is that you would be naive to think you're not going to have to change your product for every market you go to. So similarly to that experience, you have to be ready to make changes fast. We also set up a purely vertical team for international. So engineering, product, go to market, again, 5 to 10 people. And I think that pod methodology, if you can make it work for your company, really does yield benefits, because you'll operate at Plaid, we call international a startup within a startup. And I think that's the right way to think about international expansion. You will need to move faster. You will need to make changes. You will need to be able to operate on a different cadence than a broader business. And I think it's important to think about it that way. I think the other thing, to echo Elena again, you definitely need boots on the ground. And that's what we did and what we needed here. And because of that, you need to plan ahead. So I think, don't think you're going to decide today, I'm launching internationally, and do it in 2 weeks. Give yourself time, make sure you're prepared, make sure you have this pod set up and you're set up for success, and do it right. Because some of these operational things, you just need to stage them beforehand as well to make it work.
Great, thank you, Keith. And before I hand over to Diana, my bad, when we say no, we do involve Canada in these conversations, folks. So I know there's a lot of folks on this call who are dialing in from Canada. I have a soft spot for Canada, so I've not forgotten you, and nor have the panelists, I'm sure. Diana, your key challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much on that perspective of Canada, by the way, because we're also, one of our favorite customers is actually a very large Canadian bank. So we're definitely into North American expansion, including Canada. Key challenges, I would say that I would very much echo Keith on the piece around planning in advance, right? I think that you need to have a very good idea in advance of how much it's going to cost you to set up a proper office somewhere. If that's having a plan of like minimum cost that you're going to incur is actually quite important. So planning from an accounting perspective, planning from a legal perspective, the consequences and the ramifications of opening an office in another location is quite important. Can you guys hear me well, by the way? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, Diana.
Yeah,
yep.
Wonderful. And so I think that one element is to do quite a lot of ground research before opening, and then planning for us has very much been getting customers before opening anything, and I think that that's something that served us well. It's also advice that we've had from a lot of mentors and peers who have gone through that experience, where it's it is costly to open an office in another region. So if you don't have a real tangible lead or someone who really wants to be your flagship customer in a region, you want to really think very carefully as to why you're spending the money, because you might not know if your product is actually the right product for that market. And it's almost until you have basically sorted your product to be the right for that market, then you shouldn't really be opening an office from our perspective. So I think that the other piece is very much also about hiring, the right talent. So having people, the way we have started is basically having someone relatively senior as the first person that you hire in that location. You don't want this to be done by a junior. You really want this to be done by someone that can be almost a good face for the whole of the company. Even if their core skill is more sales or more product, they have to be a senior person that you can kind of like really rely on, and then kind of build the company around them. So I think part of the planning for us has been to kind of find that key person that, if it's not us as founders, and definitely during COVID, that's been very difficult because nobody can travel. They basically can be your representative, and then build almost like a satellite team around them. And that senior person gets a lot of support from the headquarters and from the teams that are already well set up. And then they progressively hire people in their location around them to help them support more of the international expansion. So I think focusing on the key senior hire and good planning, like financial monetary planning, I think is actually quite key to doing this well, and without losing money.
Thank you, Diana. Yep. I mean, international expansion, before I move on to Simon, is not for the faint-hearted. You need a war chest and you need planning. It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention that London & Partners, we've assembled and curated the best in professional advice. So any companies who are looking to set up in London, just speak to me or the team, and we can put you in touch with the best lawyers, the best accountants, best HR, you name it, the whole gambit when it comes to international expansion, and the other direction if you're looking to go stateside. So don't hesitate to contact us. Simon, sir, from your side, what are the key challenges?
I think I can be quite brutally frank about it. We put boots on the ground, and then COVID hit, and we've had to downsize. The challenge has been timing. The challenge has been we are not venture backed. We are cash flow funded. And so when you're trying to do everything off of the cash flow and you're trying to make every year be accretive, you're going to face these 2-step forwards, 3-step back sort of scenarios that sometimes we've had. So for us, it's about patience and it's about consistency. And one of the things having a media presence does is it allows us to punch above our weight, and it allows us to be in rooms even when we're not in rooms. Some of you on this Zoom call, whether you're in Canada or in the US, may be familiar with 11FS just through the podcast. Some of you may not, but I would encourage you to check it out because we talk about all things fintech. It's not about us as a company, it's about all things fintech. And I think that really, from a brand presence standpoint, gives us something where we're going to be patient and we're going to keep trying and we're going to keep plugging away. But we do have a key anchor client there that really makes the investment worthwhile. So I think knowing that, the other thing we have is a phenomenal North American partner, a chap by the name of Sam Moll. If you've not met Sam, you need to. This is Uncle Fintech, like a proper original gangster OG, nicest man in fintech, but also somehow he's the old grumpy guy from the movie Home as well at the same time. I don't know how he pulls off like grumpy and awesome. Knows everybody, super well connected, and that key strategic first hire who can carry your brand but absolutely gets the market and has a network has been really, really crucial for us. And I think that's going to be the key, is then building around that when the work comes. Because for the first client, we could service it remotely. And now we're sort of starting to think, okay, we're getting back on a sure footing post-COVID, and now we need to move forward.
Great, Simon. And that's, I mean, timing's everything. And of course, and branding's everything as well. I mean, I guess you guys are slightly uniquely positioned in the fact that you've got the podcast, you're very well known, and it precedes your team, if you like. But we run a lot of sessions around branding because, as someone mentioned in the call, in many ways you're a startup again, right, in a new market. So you've got to build up your brand, unless you've been lucky enough to have hit the headlines in some fashion. Just on talent, and I'll kind of dial around and go to Eleanor perhaps around talent. That is the biggest challenge. I mean, hiring, sending over a senior person, as Diana said, is obviously really, really important. Is often seen as 101 when it comes to market expansion and then building up the team. But what are the acute challenges that you've faced in terms of hiring? We in London, we always say we've got a deep talent pool, we've got a diverse talent pool. And that's great, and that's going to continue, I'm sure. But trying to find the right talent for your product and trying to entice them, because you're trying to brand yourself to an employee that perhaps hadn't heard of you until you arrived in their market.
Absolutely.
Lots of questions there.
Yeah, so on. So I faced it real time when I joined. We were such a small team, and I would say it depends obviously on the nature of the business. But fintechs, we are in a regulated business, so we all know it adds kind of it's a double sword. So it's not that easy. So started first and foremost hiring a fantastic legal and compliance team, because you need to get your licenses in order, you need to be regulated, you need to have fantastic reputation, AML, all the baseline that wouldn't let you start and expand and reach out to any of your customers. So all this pre-work was done in advance, really looking for this talent first and foremost. And with that, we probably would have go to, agencies like you, like London and Partners, to get an advice where to get this talent, or we would go to specific agencies. My advice when I already started to scale, and there is no golden bullet there, is to try to find a very good recruiter that can help you. Because as Dhaval exactly said, the brand that is not probably known, Remitly is well known in the US, but no one really knows Remitly in Europe or in the UK, and it's such a specific value proposition. It's an immigrant product, so we don't market on TV, etc., to the wide audience. So we did need to have a very good recruiter, which had really good understanding of the company values, culture, what kind of profile of people we want to bring on to really sell the story. It's a lot about selling the story before the story is there. What really helped that we were quite well established in the US, so US story really helped. Also, if you can bring on the story of your product and make a strong affinity with the customers, so many people join because they just feel you know, the purpose of what the business does. And I'm sure every business on this line has a strong story to tell that also really help. Another source which I can recommend, I studied at the business school. I trust many of you did some level of business education. I went to my alma mater and I hired quite a few people from there. You do come back to your usual sources of previous employment and you bring people from different tech companies. We learned that fintech is such a new space. When people say they are gurus in fintech, it's questionable, you know, because I don't know how established the industry is. Probably there are some unique, but majority people just join from, you know, consumer businesses or B2B businesses, and it's a lot about technology as much as fin. So I do think finding people and probably expanding the pool beyond just fintech pool also can help. And we definitely took advice from London partners on where to source the talent or any recommendations that were coming our way. We were exploring. So yeah, I think it's a lot of trial, fail, and eventually talent that's happening.
Great. Anyone want to chime in there? Keith, Diana? We're kind of running out of time here, but it'd be good to hear your views on the talent piece.
I can jump in briefly. I think the only thing that we did slightly differently from Elena's experience is we did a landing team model. So we chose a key representative who knew Plaid really well from each department and created a little landing pod team and moved them over explicitly. Then your job is to build out a local team of your particular area. And that worked really well for Plaid. Of course, the trade-off then is while you're really familiar with your company's product in your home market, you then have to get educated in the local market. Versus if you hire a local GM, they're going to come with great knowledge of the local market, but then they're going to have to learn your product and company. I think either of those can be successful. You just have to figure out which one works for your business.
I'll very much echo that in terms of the first key hire again, right? So I think for us, we actually worked with our network a lot for that particular first person of recommendations and people that, you know, would basically personally be vetted at good senior management. I think that in general, senior management for like a tech, fast-pacing, growing company, there's not a ton of people in some ways that are going to be really good at that and going to have that experience. So when you work on your network, that definitely helps to find the right person and the right fit and to work at trying to find that person, and then you can build a team around them. So and then you can hire the recruiters and all the traditional people. But I just think for the first key person, at least for us, what's worked is to really work from our network and recommendations for that particular, you know, kind of C-suite class level of quality of person to have on site that knows the market very well culturally to start with.
Great, thanks, Diana. I mean, we've kind of transitioned into Q&A. I'm tracking some of the. So there's a question that's come up here from Nat. Did any of the panelists think about strategic alignment with investors when they expanded across the Atlantic? The same question could be asked of the US headquartered companies in terms of coming over to Europe. So Keith mentioned the consumers as a pull, but investors often are a pull as well. I know, Simon, at 11FS, you're a slightly different kind of revenue model, but just some thoughts on that. I mean, you know, that is obviously for many a big kind of, you know, a big objective.
Yeah, I don't think investors were what made us choose a market, but they were incredibly helpful in helping us figure out how to operationalize that. So we're like Index Ventures is one of our big investors. And when we landed here, they helped us set up with key candidates for some of these GM type of roles or senior roles, figuring out the local market, getting their resources. So I think definitely if you are venture backed, leaning into your investor group to help you expand internationally, because they've probably helped multiple companies do that, is a great resource as well.
Anyone else? Yep.
Yeah, I would say the same. Well, our board definitely was very helpful and involved and looking very closely at our success or non-success when we just started, and luckily turned into success. I also would say often international expansion helps to get local investors. So we brought on board Generation Fund, which is Al Gore funded fund, but it's actually headquartered in London. So that was a really nice way for us to kind of have European side of the story also on the plate. So yes, I think definitely investors, a huge impact is essentially it's success of the business. And yeah, it can make or break the business also to a degree.
Okay, well, so I've got a question on. It's a bit of a pointed question. I'm going to send it to Simon first. We've only got a couple of minutes, so it's not going to do its justice. But like I said, we've been crisscrossing across America. We've met lots and lots of banks. Great discussions, goodwill. Is this just going to evolve into innovation theatre, or are we fast tracking into some meaningful digital transformation with the fintechs helping the incumbents?
I think banks have got the joke now. Net interest margins are screwed. Interest rates are near zero. Their core business is broken. Their only revenue growth is coming from the trading desk. And if the volatility goes away and we settle into a long-term stagnation phase like we saw at the end of 2008, then their revenues are down, when you exclude the trading desk, nearly 40-50% in their core business. That's horrific. So what do? Do you manage decline, or are you going to find some way of actually reducing costs significantly? Yes, you're going to have to do that. And it's probably not post 2008 gradual rationalization that's going to get it done. We saw Handelsbanken talked about closing 50% of their branches. I expect to see a lot more really significant announcements along those lines. Also, just I think today, JP Morgan Chase launched their Square competitor, and they're actually undercutting Square. So they've got the little merchant acceptance thing and the pricing. They've changed who their competitors are. And that's a really important moment in time. The banks used to look to their left and their right and look at the other banks. I think they finally realized, oh wait, it's Square, it's PayPal. It's not the other banks that are scary. It's people who aren't banks, but that do financial services that are scary. And so that joke has landed. Like people have got the wake up call, I think, in the C-suite. And the pandemic has pulled that forward by 10 years. I think it was possible to be, hey, top line's down a little bit, top line's up a little bit. But of all the sectors of the economy, the banks are the worst performing stock, with the exception of energy, over the last 3 years. So take the pandemic out of it for a second. They're still performing atrociously versus companies that are either SaaS-based. It's interesting that PayPal and Square are both considered IT companies because of their growth. Even though you could say they're financial services, they're not included in that sector because their growth is so significant. What are the banks going to do? Are they going to start fighting fire with fire and adopting some of those business models? How are they seriously going to take cost out of their organization? Because lumbering forward with their legacy tech has kind of gotten them so far. They did mobile apps. And you know what? Like 35% of Americans now consider, according to recent data from the FDIC, consider the mobile app the primary interface. It's the number one interface out of any other thing for a consumer. So you know what? Job done. You're digitally transformed, but guess what? You've got to the first peak. That's not the end of the mountain. That's the first step. You're at base camp. The hard bit's coming. And I think that's where it's going to take some really brave execs that want to do more than manage decline.
Great, thank you, Simon. We've still got a few more minutes. Anyone wants to chime in with what's been said? Yep, Diana, if you unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously because we sell to financial services, and I think there is a reality where the C-suite definitely has the memo, and you can see literally in the past few weeks how many very senior executives are being replaced, and it's a bit of rotation of chairs that is happening, that we're seeing in front of our eyes. And I think the COVID definitely has accelerated the reality that digital transformation is basically top of everyone's agenda, and reduction of costs. Margins are going to be even worse than before, and so reduction of cost is very much on the agenda for a lot of our customers. So what we are seeing is that it's almost a situation where they realize that if they continue their same modus operandi, then they're going to continue bleeding a lot of money in random things that don't really do much for them. And there is very much the appetite to open conversations. From opening conversations to signing deals in general, I mean, what we have experienced is that in North America, people are a lot more bullish, which is definitely great. They usually don't start a conversation if they're not expecting to really look at putting some money on the table. But like I do think it is going to be about this kind of execs very much pushing the agenda, and that's also why the boards, across the industry are kind of putting much more bullish executives on the cost reduction and on the digitization piece, precisely because there's going to be a lot of people basically fighting for their lives and for preventing of cutting their own fees and all of that kind of stuff in the next few years. So I think it's going to be quite interesting of people taking drastic decisions versus the ones that don't. The ones that will and that digitize the fastest are going to definitely win the game.
Great, thanks, Diana. 2 minutes, people. So anyone wants to come in? Nope. Okay. Oh, sorry, Keith. Carry on.
I don't have anything major to add there, so I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, no, sorry. I mean, I wanted to kind of reference all things open banking, open finance, banking as a service, which I know Simon and the team have done a great piece of work around. So there's a lot of discussions here as to where the industry is going. I mean, there's a question here. Perhaps I'll finish on and maybe get Elena to kind of come into, actually, because I know it's kind of a discussion that we've had in the past. Is how do you navigate? It's a question from one of the people who's dialed in. How do you navigate the various kind of networks and support systems that exist across London, particularly? There's a multitude of them. And fintech communities, there's hundreds of them. This is a small element of it. The answer to that is you obviously come to someone like us at London Partners and we can help you navigate, and we'll certainly help you with that. But Elena, perhaps from your side, you can finish off as to how you kind of plugged into the community.
Yes, great question. And yes, to reinforce, London and Partners has been fantastic to us. I knew London and Partners for years from my previous role. And so when I moved to fintech, that was the first number that I phoned as soon as I landed, because I needed to learn about the space and the industry and get contacts. And I got fantastic references. I think there are so many other sources. So DIT, the international department, the Department of International Trade was extremely helpful to us too. They organize a number of forums, different learning sessions. They're also extremely helpful, and we partner with them. Obviously, there are different, depending on the stage of the company, there are different communities for startups or scale-ups, subject to what you want to find. I do find, as I mentioned, business school networks extremely helpful. They often invite companies, actually for exactly hiring purposes, they often invite companies on campus to promote businesses and to hire the talent, especially if you need kind of young, dynamic, tech-savvy talent. This is a good also way to get into the network. And then just generally your business context, that's what I was leveraging my previous contact in the tech space, and everyone is extremely supportive, I would say. So that will be my advice.
Thank you, Elena. Listen, we're probably going to have to bring it to an end there. So a huge thank you to Elena, to Keith, to Simon, and to Diana. Thank you for your time. I know you've got really busy diaries, so thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. I suspect we've probably just skirted across some of those big kind of chunky, challenging areas. So perhaps we can kind of resume at another time and dive a bit deeper into those subject matters. So thank you again. Appreciate it. I think I'm handing over to Karen.
You are. Thank you. Well, thanks so much, everyone. It was fantastic to hear all about your experiences, tips and challenges, and for being so open. Great to hear your drivers for expanding, both to London and from London to North America, how important it is to work with people on the ground in those markets, and also to hear this easier to adjust to working from home being a fintech company, and how important talent is and to have someone who really knows the company and culture. I want to mention quickly our broadcast list that some of you may already know and have signed up to. This is what we call our Good News, Global Good Newsroom, where we have over 1,000 people now who are registered on this from around the world. You just need to initially send a message from your phone to this number that you would love to be a part of the Good Newsroom community, and you will then receive good news stories every few days from the London ecosystem, or specific stories. Some of them about fintech, you'll be able to tweet and put in your social media. Just to let you know, these messages are from London and Partners only, and if you message back, only London and Partners can see those messages. If you also have a good news story and you'd like us to amplify it, then email it to us and we can get that out to our Global Good Newsroom too. And we're just going to quickly launch a poll. We'd really appreciate it if you could fill these few questions in. It enables us and helps us to keep building on the content and quality of these events so that we're really bringing you what you need going forward for the next few months. So I'm just going to give you just a minute to fill in the polls if possible. I'll wait for you guys to close it and then I'll move on.
Sorry, they're still voting.
No problem.
We're at 35%. Keep going, guys.
These are really helpful to us, so we really appreciate any feedback you can give us. Just a quick mention. Okay. Just a quick mention for those companies that are staying on to meet our Mayor's International Business Programme companies. You know who you are. Please stay on this call after we say our goodbyes. Please make sure you amend your name to also include your company, so we're able to put you in the right breakout rooms. Otherwise, it gets really complicated. So that just really leads me to thank all of our speakers today: Keith, Eleanor, Diana, Simon, and Dhaval. Thank you to all of our participants for being so engaged, and thanks to the team for hosting. We are here to help you as you look to expand and help you plug into that ecosystem really quickly and efficiently. And we look forward to helping you in the future or in the next few days, and we will send a follow-up to this event. So thanks again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please stay on if you're attending the one-to-one meeting.